This story, a little bit of an update from the Chris Cornell tragedy. Of course, him taking his own life far too young. I know there's been a lot of questions and what exactly happened, and there's been some reports. Well, Vicky Cornell sat down with Robin Roberts to discuss what was going on in Chris's life and what exactly wound up happening. And as it turns out that he did have a relapse shortly before the night that he died. And, Vicky believes that it contributed to his ultimate passing. She maintains the viewpoint that he would have never taken his own life had he not gotten hooked on pills again or had a relapse. But I'll let you hear it from her in her own words here. This is Vicky Cornell opening up on what happened with Chris just a few months before that night he took his life.
A year before he died, he was prescribed a benzodiazepine to help him sleep. And it was because he had torn his shoulder. The pain in the shoulder was waking him up at night, and it was keeping him up.
By February 2017, Vicky says Chris began acting differently, which she attributed to his prescription medication.
I just remember seeing him and I said, you're walking like my grandfather. And he said to me, oh, you know what, I'll just stop taking it. I said, okay, and he didn't. In retrospect, I've learned that it's not supposed to be given to anybody who's in recovery. And if you have to give it, they have to be closely monitored, and it should not be given for more than 2 to 3 weeks. So in a 7-day period, he took 20-something pills, and in a 9-day period, 33. So he relapsed.
Though she didn't know it at the time, Chris had reached out to a colleague for help, writing in an email, "Would love to talk, had relapse." But less than 2 months later, Chris's struggle would hit its peak in Detroit.
He was off pitch. He forgot words. First thing he said to me when he called me that night was the ringing in my ears. I couldn't stop the ringing. He was slurring his speech a lot.
So at that point you were thinking, you've got to get him help.
Yes. And I'm like, Chris, please tell me what you took. If you tell me, I forgive you, and I'm going to come be with you tomorrow. I called the security guard and I said to him, you need to go to his room. The door will be bolted, and don't wait, just break it. And in the meantime, I was calling for help from the hotel as well. And I said, please call an ambulance, please send help. And then that was it.
Chris had killed himself.
My children woke up, and that was probably the most tragic thing you could ever go through.
The events of that night still weigh heavily on Vicky.
People say, can't blame yourself, and I'm trying not to. But there were signs.
You can't blame yourself, Vicky. You relapse after cancer. I had a relapse and nobody questioned it. Why is it when you have an addiction, which is an illness, why is it any different? It's not.
People don't recognize it as a disease. And I feel guilty of the same thing.
What is your message about addiction to help people better understand?
I think that there's so much stigma around addiction, and I think it's time that we get away from that. And my husband was the furthest thing from a rock star junkie. He just wasn't. He was the best husband, the greatest father. I lost my soulmate and the love of my life.
For Nightline, I'm Robin Roberts in New York.
So that's Robin Roberts with the report there. And God, it's just so tough. I mean, isn't it? It's just so tough. You know, you have a situation where I'm sure he was embarrassed and felt he let her down and didn't want to open up to her. You hear her say, just tell me, I won't be mad, right? We've all been in relationships where somebody like disappoints you or lets you down, and you need to keep that communication open, but it's become difficult because of past troubles. And Things you think about, could it have been avoided? She finds out later he shouldn't have been prescribed those medications if he had troubles, and he should have been monitored, and they gave him much more than he should have been given. And you go back and you look at all these things. Her not wanting to, Robin saying don't blame yourself, but her saying there were signs and maybe I could have done more. And it's just a super, super tough situation. It really is difficult. Not an easy issue. But again, along with some of the other things that we, have discussed, something that we need to continue to have an open dialogue about and see if we can make things a little bit better with these particular issues. So hopefully from Chris Cornell and his situation in his life, we can learn some things and maybe make it better and maybe help people more down the road. So that's the latest on Chris Cornell. And a kudos to Vicky for speaking out and being so honest, because that's all part of it. It's easy for her to not want to talk and share and put herself in the spotlight and open herself up for ridicule, but it takes a lot of guts to stand up there and say, this is what happened, and hopefully it can help people in the future. So that's the latest on Chris Cornell. 8:46 on the morning show. We'll give away some tickets for Hani El Khatib after a Mumford & Sons listener pick, and then get to the EHM cover story. It's 92.9 and 96.9 EHM.